Testing, testing. Oh, golly, if you could look at yourselves tonight. Thank you. First off, thank you for being here. This is one of the first of many times that we can get together to discuss the nature of the church and also where we've been and where we're going. So First, I'd like to say words of gratitude to the discernment team and the prayerfulness and the diligence that they have engaged in on your behalf over the last several months. And so this evening, this is just the maiden voyage. And so I know that you'll have questions and concerns and things like that. Roger has some pieces of paper that if you'd like to jot down some notes or a question to have that forwarded and addressed, please do so. But knowing that we're about the business of the church and we're people that are deeply in love with the church, let's bow together as we pray. Lord Jesus, we ask that you'll come in our midst tonight and hold sway over our lives and our conversation. This is your church. Remind us that for a season and time, we are here. But it's a long season, and our love and our experience and our passion runs deep. I pray, even to now, that you will assuage all anxiety and concerns that those have for tonight and for the future. Remind us that we're in this together. Bless those who will speak. Bless those who will hear. Tonight, in all ways, we lift up those who are not able to be here for various reasons. But those who are here, I pray that you'll bless us, that we might be a blessing to others. All this we pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. Richard, would you like to come begin?
Good evening. I thought I'd start with one of my favorite phrases. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And I thought I would tell you to start with how my day started, because it's been a great day. I started off early. I finally caught the little critter that had been terrorizing my cat and stealing his food. It was an ornery little possum. I relocated him to the other side of Lynch's River. Went for a walk to make sure all my parts were working. Came up here and helped Sharon Sturdivant make some copies for us tonight. And now I get the honor and the privilege of talking to my church family. However, the subject's a little interesting, as I'm sure most of you know. If you've been looking at the slides, you see that we've got a topic about this big. Tonight, we're going to try to cover about this much of it to try and educate us as to what in the world is going on in the United Methodist Church. I've only been coming here since '86. I think Lee said he's been here since '78. Iris McFarland, who's a member of the team, told Jane she'd been here. She said she was a charter member at age 13. We got another charter member. And as all of you know, St. Luke's got just a very, very rich heritage, and we'd very much like to keep it that way and keep it continuing. Some of the pre-slides have shown a little bit about what is the United Methodist Church. The map shows you that there are 5 jurisdictions in the United Methodist Church, divided into 54 annual conferences. That's kind of important, and I think you'll see a little bit later how it kind of plays into what we've been looking at and what's been going on. We have a website set up, or we have a portion of the St. Luke website that has a section where you can ask questions. Several of you have. Several others have given me and some other members questions. I'm going to try to answer some of those as I'm making the initial presentation. And then we've got some team members who are ready, willing, and able to answer any other questions that we know the answers to. However, as Pastor Charles said, this is our maiden voyage, if you will. So we are just going to kind of get started and try and outline some of the problems that the churches, the United Methodist Church is experiencing, and then kind of move on in some other sessions to maybe hone in on some of the specifics about what's going on. All right. First of all, let me introduce the team, and I think they've been introduced several times, but we've got 5 of the 7 here. We've got Heather Norman, Dr. Gardner, Allison Dunsmore, Roger, and myself. Iris McFarland is a member of the team. She is sick and has been for the last couple of days. And Tim Ringer is playing in Bentonville with the Walton family, I think. And so he wants to be here, and I think he's listening, so he'll hopefully forgive me for saying that he's playing out there. All right, why was the team formed? Back in late summer, early fall, several members had started questioning about what in the world is going on in the United Methodist Church. Some were already doing some heavy research. Others were just, I think, I can't see where she is. Judy Pigg had someone at Buncombe Street in Greenville that was going full force through the situation. Another had members of their family in other churches. We at St. Luke, I don't know if we have, it was said in one of our meetings that we've been kind of shielded from the national problems because we've been doing what we're supposed to do. We're following the Bible. We are following the book of discipline. We've had preachers who do both of those things, so we have not strayed from good United Methodist principles. We've been doing what we're supposed to do. However, a lot of churches have not. So, after some discussions with several people, some talk at the administrative council level, we decided that it was time to let's start studying. Let's start seeing if we could find out what is going on. At a meeting right after our charge conference, the administrative council was asked to nominate people that might be good to serve on a discernment team. We called it the discernment team, and that's going to be kind of trouble in here in just a minute when I get to the bishop's statement. But we had some nominations. After a week or two, we called for a vote. 7 people were nominated to serve on the team. It was right after the first of the year, this year, that we began meeting, and we were meeting in earnest, and we've been doing so weekly since the 1st of January. To say that the information that we have been going through is troubling is an understatement. But for those of you, and I know there's a lot who have done their own research, very interestingly, I had one person come in today and said, "What are we doing? What's going on?" Had another ask me if we were going to have a chance to discuss things before we vote. So we're nowhere close to doing any of those things. All we're doing, and what we have been told to do, Joe, would you put that slide about the purpose? That's what we've been asked to do. If you'll take a second and just read that closely for me.
If you have trouble reading, please let us know. We have a handful of slides.
We do. Our purpose, and our only purpose, is to study and present. Tonight we begin presenting. We've been doing some studying. We've still got a lot more to do, but tonight we begin presenting. There's no recommendation in that mission statement, if you will, or the purpose. That's not our job. That's your job. If after hearing what you hear over the next few meetings, you decide some action needs to be taken, that's what needs to be done. That's not what we're doing. All we're doing is presenting information that we've been compiling. Next question, obviously, is what are we compiling information on? Since, I don't know, I'm going to start with 72, but for decades and decades, the Methodist Church has been struggling with the issue of homosexuality among clergy and same-sex marriages. In 1972, Joel, how about the points of conflict? The circle? Yes. All right. In a nutshell, those are the areas that we've been looking at. It starts with homosexuality. That has been kind of the bright bulb in the Methodist Church, again, as I said, for decades and decades. However, underlying our research, there are other troubling issues, and I'll talk a little bit in a minute about the theology deviations, if you will, that some of the progressive factions are putting forth. And then there's the issue of where there has been disobedience to the book of discipline, there has been no consequences. And that issue itself is troubling in a very large way. As I said, since 1972, the United Methodist Church, at its general conference in 1972, and a general conference, and again, I'm learning a lot of this because I've never been a member to annual conference, and I certainly have never been a member to the general conference. But the general conference is the United Methodist Church's 4-year meeting where policy is made. If there's to be a change in the book of discipline, it happens at the general conference. Delegates are elected from all over the world. They come and they meet for days, made up, I think, half and half of clergy and lay members that have been elected. And if there are policy changes, that's when it happens. Although it had been debated, I think in 1972, that was the first general conference after the merger with the Evangelical United Brethren Church that made us United Methodist. At that general conference, it was passed and made a part of the Book of Discipline that homosexuality is not biblical, that it is incompatible with Christian teaching. All right, 1972, that's great. The issue was decided, that's where it ends. Far from it. It has been hotly debated since then. And Charles, I asked him the other night if I could say that it has been a hot button at every general conference since 1972. Move along to 2016. We had a general conference, and I haven't looked to see the build-up to 2016, but this issue was very, very hotly debated in 2016. It was so hotly debated that the conference actually voted to stop debate. It got so contentious, they just could not deal with it, and they voted by a slim margin to say, we're not talking about this anymore. So at the end of 2016 General Conference, nothing had been changed, nothing had been decided. From 2016 to 2019, the debate raged. And I guess as we think about life in general, the issue of homosexuality has been very fluid, and it has changed. The general public has changed a lot of their views on that. However, the church has not. The church has kept the prohibition or the statement that it is incompatible with Christian teachings in their book of discipline. And I forgot to tell you, the book of discipline is kind of our rules of the road. That's where we find out what we're supposed to do as Methodists. It's kind of our constitution, it's our bylaws, it's what we do as United Methodist. So, We've got debate that was halted in 2016, and then we have it raging among the various factions in the church for the next 3 years. A special general conference was called for 2019. Sole issue, what are we going to do about homosexuality? Prior to the conference, I think there were actually 6, didn't we say, Roger? 6 different plans. I think 3 main ones were proposed. And if y'all remember, when Pastor Charles was here, he actually told us about that. He had some handouts about them. Carl, I'm sorry. Well, don't get me started on the bishop's name, okay? He actually had some handouts, and we talked about that. The 3 main proposals at that time, one was called the One Church Plan, and the One Church Plan basically said that would allow local churches and annual conferences to decide for themselves how to handle this issue. So each conference could, and there are 54 of them in the United States, but each conference under that plan could decide what they were going to do about the issue. All right? Plan number 2 was called the Connectional Conference Plan. And that plan said there are 54, we could have 54 different opinions under the One Church Plan. So the Connectional Conference Plan proposed to separate the United Methodist Church into 3 main divisions. And those divisions each had their own view on the issue. And I think there was traditional, kind of middle, and kind of progressive. And then what would happen under that plan is that your annual conference could say, well, we think like those folks over there, so we're going to join A plan or B plan or C plan, whatever it happens to be. The third proposal was the traditional plan, which is basically what we have had and what we continue to have. There were some issues with the traditional plan as it was proposed, and there was some, I think, some pre-planning problems on the traditional plan, but at the 2019 conference, the conference adopted the traditional plan, kept the traditional plan. Again, you'd say, all right, they've decided that's it, right? Absolutely not. Immediately after the General Conference of 2019, the debate continued to just rage on. In fact, after the conference, 28 of the 54 annual conferences said, we don't care what you passed in 2019, we're not going to go along with that view that's in the Book of Discipline. In other words, we're going to do what we think is right, whether it's progressive or somewhere in between. So, in addition to the passage of the traditional plan, because the matter was so contentious, either the delegates or the Judicial Council, I'm not really sure what body did that, but they came up with this plan. Then they said, well, if you don't like the traditional plan and you really don't think that you can remain a Methodist in the United Methodist Church, we're going to give you a way to get out. One of the things that people started talking about back in the fall that kind of got everyone's attention was paragraph 2553 of the discipline, which was passed at that 2019 General Conference. And it basically said, here's a way to get out while the getting's good. It was anticipated that the progressives who did not like the language of the traditional plan would use that paragraph to get out. However, the progressives dug in and basically said, we're just not going to pay any attention to the traditional plan, but we're going to stay United Methodist. So it just kind of rocked along, and the anticipated next General Conference was 2020, 1 year down the road. We all know what happened to it. COVID hit. No 2020, no 2021, no 2022. It's been postponed to 2024. The problem is that the section paragraph 2553 that was passed to allow disaffiliation for those congregations or those churches that did not want to remain faithful to the Book of Discipline, which prohibited homosexuality in the clergy and same-sex marriages, the progressives didn't use it. So about a year or so ago, because the progressives were gaining strength, if you will, gaining votes, so they say, traditional churches started using that paragraph to get out. I think it was 2021, maybe they began. Last year, it kind of gathered steam. The problem, as everyone who studied it noticed, was that that provision expires the end of this year. December 31st of 2023, that paragraph ends. It was anticipated that the General Conference of 2020 would have provided some more input into the question, and that we'd be 2 or 3 years down the road from the General Conference of 2020, which never happened and still has not happened. So, churches wanting to get out of the United Methodist Church began using that paragraph, and I think there was 2021 to 2022, maybe 1,500 churches. I don't remember the exact number, but around 1,500 churches disaffiliated under that paragraph. South Carolina churches, and again, we began looking at the Buncombe Street information. They had town halls. Some of these other churches had been studying this problem for years. They had had committees such as ours for years, and they were way down the road when we first noticed what was happening. Buncombe Street was one, and they have some wonderful information. If you have not looked at it, you should. We are patterning some of the things that we're doing after some of their presentations. Their presentation on theology, I've told the committee, I've watched it probably 4 times, one of the driest presentations you have ever seen, but extremely helpful to talk about the deviations to theology that the progressives are pushing. The Buncombe Street disaffiliation series of videos. And I didn't mention it, but those who want, it's on the slide at on our slides at the very end. We made 50 copies of the slides, which again have a resource list of things that we have been looking at, not comprehensive, but basically very, very good ones. If you want a hard copy of it, we've got 50 of them. It's available I think on the website. So if you're not like me, if you're kind of computer literate, save the hard copies for somebody who is not quite as comfortable navigating on the computer. But it's the Buncombe Street, and Buncombe Street's a big church in Greenville. Mount Horeb over in Lexington also has been undergoing the same process, and they have some very, very good ones also. But those two series of videos will cover a lot of ground. And again, and I apologize if what I'm saying is too elementary, because a lot of you I know have already been doing this research, but some have not. So in order to get kind of everybody up to speed, that's what we wanted to do tonight, and is basically show the problems that we have seen and what resources are available for you to study also. All right, now, completely lost where I was, but because they did not have the 2020, 2021, or 2022 General Conference, there's been nothing decided since 2019. Paragraph 2553 that, again, and I had several people in the church say, we got to do something because this paragraph ends at the end of 2023, and if we don't do something, we just miss out. Well, another problem was the South Carolina Annual Conference, our bishop said 2553 doesn't apply to South Carolina. You can't use it. He basically said, because 2553 says that if you are dissatisfied with the language of the 2016 Book of Discipline and the way that South Carolina is handling it or abiding or not abiding by it, then you can use 2553. That's not a problem in South Carolina. It's a national problem. It's not a South Carolina problem. In any event, our bishop says, well, because there are churches undergoing the process outlined in 2553 for disaffiliation already, we are not encouraging or discouraging. We're just basically saying we're going to provide another method, or the South Carolina method, for disaffiliating. It's been very confusing. That came out December 19th, 2022. It's not called the disaffiliation process, it's called the discernment process. And so our discernment team has been confused with the discernment process. Totally different. Doesn't have anything to, we have educational duties, but we don't have anything to do with the bishop's discernment process. However, I made 50 copies of that, Sharon made 50 copies of that today, and if you have not read that, you need to read that as we go along the educational process, because the wording is that the discernment process is grounded not in paragraph 2553, but paragraph 2549. That paragraph is used, or has been used, traditionally for churches who say, we no longer can be a Methodist church. We need to sell our property. Doesn't have anything to do with the process that we're in, but that's just a paragraph that's been in the discipline for some time, and our bishop has said, we're going to use those provisions in order to let churches who have decided that they want to get out of the United Methodist Church, get out of the Methodist Church. Interesting part about it, and Lee will talk a little bit more about this, hopefully, but 2553 had some financial requirements for getting out of the church. The bishop's rules, and I say the bishop's rules, it's his council, I think, that did the actual rules, if you will. But his plan, in addition to the monetary requirements of 2553, added on a little 10% surcharge, if you will. He calls it a tithe. But if the church goes through the process of getting out, not only does the church have to pay current year apportionments, another year's apportionments, unfunded pension plans, but now you got to pay a 10% tithe of the appraised value of all real estate that you own and all liquid assets, or basically all your finances. So, that happened end of December. I think the Buncombe Street crowd had voted in October to get out under 2553. They're rolling along. I think I read somewhere recently that they have said, we're not going to use either one of those provisions. We're just going to negotiate separately with the bishop, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Mount Horeb, I think, if they haven't voted, they're getting ready to vote, and they have been through their process. The reason I mentioned both of those things is our team has been asked several times, why haven't we done what's necessary to get out? Well, we're not there. We're learning. We're still studying. We're still, hopefully, educating. But the requirement under the bishop's rules was that certain steps had to be taken prior to March 1st in order to be presented at this year's South Carolina Annual Conference. Several churches have done that. Obviously, we have not. We are still studying, and we are still learning. Hopefully, we'll be able to find out how the annual conference is going to handle this situation, because we have a big church in Greenville that says we're going at them separately around the corner, and then we have, I think, Mount Horeb and several other churches are going to be running straight at them under the provisions of 2549. So, as an aside, and it's really not an aside, in my mind, and in the mind, I think, of most of the people on the committee, the homosexual issue, again, is the bright bulb. That's been the one that's been in front of everybody. But if you start reading about the deviations to our traditional theology that are also being pushed, if you will, by certain factions, it is frightening. The main, I want to read you a sentence that I read the other day. The progressive views on theology have been described as the deeper issues are those of authority and the continuity with the faith and practices we ultimately received from the apostles as found in Scripture. Well, it gets pretty serious when you start questioning Jesus' divinity, Jesus' virgin birth, Jesus' resurrection and atonement for our sins, and basically the concept that the Bible is God's Word. When you start questioning those, it gets a little troubling. In addition to that, if I can read that. As I mentioned earlier, one of the other key issues is that particularly the Western and mid-northern annual conferences have pretty much said, we're not following this traditional plan that's in the Book of Discipline. We're just going to do our thing. And they have done their thing. And some of the things are very, very troubling. The reaction of the Methodist Church to those troubling actions has been, to say the least, nothing. They've not done anything to bring this disobedience back into the fold. In fact, it's just kind of rolling and rolling. So we've got a situation where the issue that started the process of the prohibition against homosexual clergy and same-sex marriages morphs into this deviation of our basic theology and the church's non-reaction to it. So we've got a situation where many in the church feel that the only thing that's going to happen is the church is not going to implode, it's basically going to separate. And it's not something that we in Hartsville are unfamiliar with. The Presbyterians have done it, the Episcopalians have done it, the Lutherans have done it. I think the Quakers even did it. But basically all other denominations, pretty much all other denominations have already gone through all of this process. We're kind of one of the last ones, and it's happening now. So, with that, I really did want to reemphasize the fact that the discernment team is not the discernment process that the bishop has labeled his disaffiliation process. It is not. It's in no way, shape, or form the same thing. All we are doing is what we were told, or not what we were told, but the mission statement that we adopted, which is basically find out what's going on, inform the congregation, see what happens from there. So that's kind of where we are. Now, I think, have we already passed out papers for questions? If you have questions, and we expect that there will be more, I hope I have answered a couple of the questions that have already been submitted. If you have a question, please write it down. I think this is going live stream, so we want to read them out if you have one. Those that submitted questions, if you are here, have I answered your question? Hopefully? No? Lee's going to get to him in just a minute. He's going to talk money. Yes, sir. No, but I think that you can look on the website. As I understand it, we are live streaming the way we normally do our services. And then after that, it's kind of going to be shut off. And if you want to look at it again, Joe, what do you have to do if you want to look at it again?
If we decide to keep it private, we can get it to you. We may decide that we just keep it public, but that's a decision we'll make.
Okay, all right. It'll be available one way or the other. It might be hard to get to, or it might be easy to get to. All right. Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that discernment is understanding God's will for our lives?
Yes, it certainly is.
Some people may not know what discernment means.
Well, and I think it means, every time I read a passage in the Bible, it talks about discernment. That's a very good way of putting it. I think we could have been called the Education Committee, about the UMC, hot button issues, Education Committee. However, that's kind of where we find ourselves. All right, I finished jabbering. Lee, do you want to talk a little bit about money? Great.
Before I get to talking about dollars and cents, I want to talk about why dollars and cents really matters. I didn't realize it until the Education Committee started meeting that when a church becomes United Methodist, they, through an irrevocable trust, give their property to the Methodist Conference, United Methodist Conference here. So in South Carolina, the conference is headquartered in Columbia, but what it means is that we agree that someone donated the land, and we raised the money and built the building, and we raised the money and built the sanctuary, and we raised the money and bought all the equipment, and then we gave the deed to all of that to the United Methodist Conference. It's a strange way of doing things, but when I first learned about it, I thought, wow, where did this come from? Well, it started with John Wesley back in the late 1800s, no, or 1700s. And some of the reading I did said that Wesley was concerned that some churches might well jump on the bandwagon, be a part of the Methodist Church, and they got established, and they'd dash off and be independent once they were organized. Well, Wesley came up with a great idea. All your property, everything the church owns, belongs to the Methodist Church. So if you want to get out, you're going to have to pay for it. So that's where we are now with dollars and cents. One important thing, and Rick's already mentioned this, is the bishop's letter. And this one came out on December 19, but you really, 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 really need to read this. It's 2 pages, the part I want to read to you, and then talk about dollars and cents. Says before a church conference takes place, the local church must complete an intentional 30-day process of discernment, and that's not what we're doing. But that'll be one of the things we'll have to do if we decided to go that route. Then representatives of the congregation will be assigned the responsibility of ensuring that certain fiscal obligations as calculated by conference trustees, you heard that, as calculated by conference trustees, are satisfied before the congregation can vote on whether to separate. So these financial obligations will be set in stone. We will have to satisfy those obligations before we can take a vote. Now, I don't think it means we got to hand over the money at that time, but it has to be a legal document that will be binding to St. Luke. But anyway, to list out the requirements. A tithe equal to 10% of the appraised value, now remember that word appraised, value of church property and liquid assets. The figures I'm going to give you are not appraised, so they could come in lower, and I've been told by others that the figures I'll be giving you are more the replacement values or the values from the insurance company of what it would take to replace St. Luke Church. So it's 10% of all property and liquid assets. Then any unpaid apportionment giving for the prior year, as well as for the year of closure up to the date of annual conference. All right, St. Luke has traditionally every year paid our annual apportionments. So in that regard, we're in good shape. Some churches, some big churches in the South Carolina Conference don't pay all theirs. They decide, we're going to send half, we're going to send 20%, just whatever. But I was surprised that when you start studying this stuff and digging into it, researching it, that all churches don't do it the way St. Luke does. Then you have to pay an additional 12 months of apportionment. So it'd be the year you're in and one more year of whatever your apportionments would be. Then all unpaid salary and benefits due to the clergy appointed to the church. So let's say Charles were here at the time, he wasn't going to go with us, but we got to pay him out through the end of the year. And then there is this final requirement, a withdrawal liability equal to the church's proportional share of any unfunded pension obligations. All Methodist pastors are included in the conference's pension plan. And these monies are put into a fund, and as the stock market rises, it looks great. As the stock market crashes, it looks terrible. Anybody that's on the state pension plan knows, if you follow that at all, you know how that works. This is the only one of these items that I've been unable to get any information on. Several calls to the district office, 2 visits to the district office. I promise that I may get it next week is where we are. But it's information that is available at the district office. A little further research, talking to someone else that has gone through is in the discernment process, said that you can pretty much plan on that being about what your apportionments are going to be at the present time based on the stock market. So for us, that'd be another another $79,000. So if you add all that up, you come to a figure, or multiple figures. So I'm going to give you these. If you use a figure that the insurance company uses for when we get insurance on the buildings and property here at St. Luke, property $4,350,000. That includes the church building, the scout hut, liquid assets, $550,000. That's everything we've got in the bank. That's the checking account. That's the restricted funds. That's the endowment. Anything that you can turn into hard cash. We've got two apportionments, which would be about, we would say, guessing $150,000. Unfunded pension, this is a guess on my part, $75,000. And I've thrown in another line item here of related expenses. Legal, at some point in time, it's recommended you retain an attorney to help you through the process if you were getting out. But that's on the back side of the vote. But then you've got appraisals. You have to get your own 501c3, things like that. But anyway, that brings us to a little over $5 million in total church property. 10% of that, it comes out to $517,000 that it could cost us. Personally, I think that's on the high side. I've been told that church property does not appraise very high because it's a single-use kind of building or structure, and that anyone that, let's say we were, anyone who wanted to buy it, that we just abandoned the church, they would come in and say, well, man, we got to pay $1 million to tear this place down and get it ready to build houses on. So that's the kind of things that we face there. But to make that sound better, that's $517,000, make it sound better. If we went with the replacement value as determined by the insurance company and include all those costs that I just did, it'd be $6,500,000. So we'd have $650,000. So already we saved over $150,000. But that's where we are as far as finances go. Until we do, if we reach that point and we get an appraisal, we won't know exactly what we'll have to pay, but it'll be a major fundraising campaign. I can grant you that. But I won't. Yes, go ahead. That payout would be 10% of all church property, the value of 10%. So it'd be around, say, we're guessing anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. That's a very big range there. But like I said, right now it's just a guess. It does include the parsonage because that's church property. Anything that, if we pay that amount. Right, correct. Yeah. That's correct. There is no property tax on the church or the parsonage. The only thing we pay tax on is the church bus. And there was a lot we had for years down here near Sunoco, down on North 15 that we paid so much we paid more than the value of the property, and we finally got rid of it. But, all right, I want to answer some questions here that I got concerning finances. He said, should we continue to pay monthly on our pledge at St. Luke? I want a portion of the dollars that we give to St. Luke continue to go to the UMC or the liberal left. Yes, please continue to pay your pledges. We need to pledge money. You need offerings from the congregation to for operating expenses. Oh, okay. Should we continue to pay monthly on our pledges to St. Luke? But yeah, we don't know when this process may happen, but we need to keep operating like it's way down the road. Keep saving souls and paying your pledges. All right. Next question. Is there any way for St. Luke to disaffiliate before an essential deadline? In other words, is there a disaffiliation scenario where St. Luke can keep our property and not basically have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy our property. I've listened to some videos from attorneys, or one attorney, group, legal firm out of Chicago. They said if you decide to file suit against UMC, that you have less than a 60-40 chance. I mean, it's less than 40% that you will win the suit. Because it's an irrevocable trust, been in practice for 200 years or more. All right, it says if we lose our property, what will happen to the columbarium and the remains of our loved ones? Well, Bonnie and I have a niche over here, and I was concerned about this too. If worst case, we couldn't pay it, we decided we would get out, we just close the church down. Well, at your own cost or the cost of the church, we could move that somewhere else. But if it belonged to somebody, to another person or entity, they may come in and say, well, if you want that, you've got to move it. Tell us, and we just have to end up doing that. Another question, does it matter that the land St. Luke was built on was donated by a local family? What about the building additions that were done through capital fund campaigns and loans paid back by members? How can UMC legally get by with this? I think I've already answered that. I read about a church that the name on the deed was never changed. They're holding it and it's in the name of the person that gave the property. Well, that was determined in court that because of the irrevocable trust, that property belonged to the United Methodist Church. So that's been debated in, at least, I don't know if it was in South Carolina, but it's been debated and decided. The total on what now? Okay. The total cost of the church, and I hate to give you such a broad range, but anywhere I'm guessing $250,000 to $500,000. $250,000 to $500,000. Okay, another question. Is there any hope of the possibility that St. Luke could raise the money to buy back our church property? That is our only hope. We either buy it back, or we can just keep doing what we're doing, continue along the way we've been going, and who knows how long that would be, but it's anybody's guess. It says, regarding the current proposal of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on capital improvements and furnishing in the sanctuary and narthex, wouldn't it be counterproductive to go forward with this plan? That is another committee's decision to make, and not ours and not mine. So I'm not going to touch that one. Okay, that pretty much wraps up the financial part. You got some.
Stay close, because money may come up again. A couple of questions from the audience here. What is on the other side of disaffiliation? We haven't gotten there yet. However, we're not close. However, how many of you have seen the presentation made by Bishop Scott Jones in Texas from last summer? All right. Yes, it was shown in several of the Sunday schools several weeks ago. That's the first place that I started, and that's still one of the better explanations of what's going on and what might be alternatives. The way I understand what he said and others have said, that on the other side, if you say, I don't want to be a United Methodist anymore, you do what's necessary to get out, do you take your building with you or not, There are basically two options. Number one, you go independent, which in his words is wonderful for a little while, particularly if you have one of those charismatic preachers that can keep the crowd coming and keep the money coming. When you lose that preacher, churches tend to drop off quickly, and some of them, and this is not just during this process, this is way, way back, they kind of go away. The other alternative that he mentions, and a lot of folks have mentioned, is there is a brand new global Methodist church, which has been talked about for several years, and I think it just cranked up the 1st of January of this year. And they are, I don't even know if they've gotten too far off the ground, but the same article that I read about the number of churches that were getting out or had gotten out already, about half of those have already signed on to the Global Methodist Church, which, as I understand it, is pretty much a traditional Methodist church. Again, understanding that we have not.
My understanding that the fees paid at the Global Methodist Church are about half of the fees.
So far, yes, so far. But again, they're just now getting off the ground, so absolutely. I hope this is a joke. It says, how quickly can the South Carolina bishop be replaced? I don't think we want to talk about that. Have other denominations also questioned the Bible as the same methods the Methodists are doing? I don't know a lot. I think there's a progressive Presbyterian faction and a traditional Presbyterian faction. A family friend has said that the Episcopalians have yes, they definitely did that, and they have, if you know any Episcopalians in Hartsville, there's a small group that's still in the building downtown, and then there's a fairly large group that is meeting elsewhere, and those are the traditionalists. I think the progressive wing of the Episcopal Church has ended up with their building. How can the individual bishops change or make new rules that differ from ones made at the General Conference, which includes Methodist worldwide? What little that I know, and I think the other team members will probably back it up, United Methodist Church bishops have a lot of power. Particularly as to the disaffiliation process. I think some of the language said, and the bishops at the of annual conferences can tack on anything else that they think is appropriate. So I think they were given some authority within the rules of those disaffiliation processes.
It's something that made me kind of understand a little bit better about the bishop is that they said if they come back, you got a president, and then you got states, you got governors.
Yes.
And I thought, well, that makes you see how, different states do different things, so different countries.
Well, and I certainly don't feel that I'm competent to talk about the South Carolina annual conference, but I think from what little I've read, our bishop has been very, very focused on keeping the church together. He, I think, has done what is right and has been the traditional plan in adhering to the Book of Discipline. I don't think there's any of these aberrations in South Carolina, to my knowledge. I mean, there's just some bizarre things happening in the Methodist Church in other conferences, and I don't think that's happened in South Carolina. And I think, again, without knowing, I'm just kind of spouting off at the mouth, but I think he has been very, very dedicated to keeping the church together, and has been very dedicated to following the Book of Discipline. That having been said, he's also tacked a 10% tithe onto getting out, which is not real good for anybody. Any other questions? The other thing I really want to stress is please feel free to tell us what direction that you would like to go. We are going to continue working and studying. I think we're going to probably end up having a session on the for lack of a better word, the deviations from our traditional theology. I think we're probably going to have a session on that, because that's very, very troubling. We can talk some more at a later time about money. The problem with the money, as Lee said, wherever Lee went, there's Lee, the appraised value, I think that I read somewhere that it cost about $2,500 and up to get an approved appraisal, an approved church appraisal. You can't just go out and go downtown and say, we just need an appraisal. It has to be an approved church appraiser, and that those costs are somewhere $2,500 to $3,500. If we really get interested, I mean, we can spend that money to say, okay, what will it cost us to get out? Where we find ourselves, because we were not far enough along in our process to do anything before the March 1st deadline, I think we're going to see what happens at this year's annual conference. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're also going to see what happens in 2024 at the general conference, and it could bust wide open at that point in time, just don't know. But we'll have the benefit of seeing what happens this year to any churches that have already gone through the process. But please, if you'll use the website to ask questions or get the questions to one of us, we'll continue to study and hopefully end up here again in a few weeks to see if we can talk some more. Yes, sir.
I just gave him a late question there
Oh, I'm sorry.
about apportionments.
What happens to a church that is delinquent in apportionment payments when and if they vote to leave? I think, and again, I've got 50 copies of the bishop's rules, so if you'll take those, they got to catch them up. I don't think they have to catch up years and years worth. I think they have to pay the year that they're in, that they decide to disaffiliate. They have to pay an additional year. They have to pay the unfunded pension plan monies, and then they've got to pay that 10% tithe. Plus any, and if we owed money at the bank, we'd have to pay all of that off also.
It just sounds to me like in a case like that, and where's the incentive for us to continue to pay our 100% portion? We don't know how long the process is going to take.
Well, we are still a United Methodist Church. If we make a pledge, we're making it to St. Luke. That's God's money. We are saying, here is what we want to give to our church to continue to operate. General figures, I think our budget's somewhere around $750-ish or so. Our apportionments are about $77.8. So roughly 10% of every dollar, 10 cents of every dollar that comes in goes to the conference. So, yes, sir.
Rick, one other change that is going to take place, I understand, is that in 2024, we'll change bishops.
Could be.
That's when he retires.
Okay.
So the rules we have now may not be the same rules in 2024.
No question. I think he can change his mind anytime he gets ready to. But one thing that is specific in that letter that says this provision is unlike 2553 and it does not have a sunset clause. It doesn't end. So if we take him at his word, as long as he's here, he can do it. But yes, you're right. And again, the general conference could blow it wide open. Just don't know. We're kind of in a mess. All right, but the only thing I can tell you is we're faithful United Methodist, and we're going to stay that way until something else happens. Yes, sir.
Rick, after you go and the team, I'd like to ask a question. One thing that's resonated with me about this whole thing, the traditionalists wanted to, and because the rest didn't like it, look where we are now. My question is, where
And that's why a lot of churches are getting out, because they are afraid of what's going to happen next year. Yeah.
Is it because the bishops have so much authority that they're the ones that aren't holding the disobedience accountable?
Yes. Yes. Well, and I'm not sure if that's correct. There hasn't been a general conference since all of this hit the fan. I mean, it's been boiling and boiling and boiling, but since 2019, there has not been a general conference. So I guess at the bishop level, they have not been enforcing the rules. I don't know if the general conference does that or will do that. Everything that we are reading, the fear is that the progressives are building and the traditionalists are jumping and going somewhere else. I think so. I think so.
Not like, 5 or 6 bishops
Hey.
sitting up there.
Okay. The people who are listening can't hear you. You want to talk?
What I'm saying is that,
I'll try to repeat it if I can, but yes.
okay, and Pastor Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? It's not like the 5 bishops sitting in are making these decisions and saying, no, we're not going to do anything with these people. There's something called the Jurisdictional Council.
Yes, those 5 jurisdictions that were on the map.
Jurisdictional Council, and that's the group that's not holding the people within their jurisdiction accountable and allowing them to get away with things. Okay?
I think you're correct. All right. Again, if I can leave you with 2 things, several things. Listen to Bishop Scott Jones's presentation. It's from August of 2022, I believe. Start looking at some of the resources that are available and that have been cited. Buncombe Street, Mount Horeb. If you have not gone through the South Carolina United Methodist Church website, and do that too, because there are several sources at the bottom of this discernment process page that are very good. But start educating yourselves. It's really amazing what's out there. It's a little bit frightening, but it's very, very eye-opening. Did I get all the questions? Does any? I think that you can tell us what additional topics you'd like for us to research and present on, and we can do that. I think it's up to the congregation to decide and tell the administrative council. If you read the bishop's rules, I think it starts at the administrative council level. That level has to vote to do something, then present it to the general congregation. There's a procedure that you have. The discernment process has to be followed. There has to be a 30-day discernment prayer time where you say, okay, what are we going to do? Before any vote, you have to get the DS involved. You have to notify the annual. You just got to follow the rules. But yes.
The reason I say that is I did talk to a minister who had a church that did this affiliate. I said, how did you decide that you were going to go on with this? He said, you took a straw vote.
That's not our purpose right now, okay? But I think that it can be done if the congregation wants to do it. Yeah, okay. Yes, ma'am. Oh, absolutely. If you want, if the St. Luke website, go on there. The entire book of discipline is available. You click on it, and you run through the index, and you can You can take a look at everything that's in there. It will definitely work for you. All right. I don't know what time it is, but we've probably overstayed our welcome. Keep the questions coming in, please. We need them. Yeah, excuse me. Yes. All right. If you need a hard copy, there are 50 copies of the slides, and there are 50 copies of the bishop's letter. If you need them, we'll have them until they're gone.